Okay, how do I want to start this?
It'll start with a sigh, no doubt.
I lean back and I think, how do I do this? And then I just sigh into the microphone.
You measure it on the grey seismometer.
Oh.
I'm on fire with the dad jokes. I've been cracking out dad jokes all day on my texts and stuff to friends. I'm in a real dad joke zone at the moment. I'm sorry. My wife sent me a text earlier saying, "Oh no, there's a hole in my boots." And I went, "Yeah, that's where you put your feet in." She just replied, "Oh, dad joke."
That's brutal. That's brutal.
I have a story to tell.
Oh, yeah? You have a story? It's Brady story time at the beginning of the podcast.
At the beginning, because this only just happened last night. And also, I'm quite ashamed about it.
Ooh, I like this story already.
Yeah. So, I had a long drive last night. I was driving from Nottingham back to Bristol. And when I'm driving is normally when I listen to like normal radio. So I was listening to BBC 5 Live, which is the radio station I listen to when I go on long drives.
Is it like talk show radio? Is that what you mean? Okay.
It's talk. It's a mixture of news and sport. It's got quite a heavy sport leaning and things like that. It's just my preferred station most of the time. Anyway, it just so happened that last night was also the night of, and I'm imagining you must know about this because you're much more plugged into the YouTube world than me. It was the night of this boxing match between Logan Paul and KSI, the YouTubers, this big grudge match, boxing match that was happening in Manchester in England and was being streamed around the world. You're familiar with this, surely?
Yeah, I don't think anyone can quickly check their analytic stats on YouTube without being inundated with there's going to be a boxing match between these two guys who, I don't know any of the details, but I just presume, as is the way with YouTube, have manufactured a grudge between themselves.
Beef, great. It's beef. It's beef.
Oh, okay, beef.
Yeah.
They've manufactured a beef between each other to both of their tremendous profit and benefit. Like, that's what I presume it is.
Yeah. Anyway, it's this thing. I actually was very late to realize it was happening. I only found out about it like a couple of days before. But anyway, I didn't even know KSI. Obviously, I've heard of this Logan Paul character because of this controversy. But
everyone has heard of Logan Paul because of his great work on YouTube.
Yeah.
But I'm in the same position where I am aware of Logan Paul. I feel like I have some sense of him. KSI is a totally unknown person to me.
Anyway, my interest in it was very low.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I was driving back in the middle of the night and it coincided with this boxing match. And someone at 5 Live had decided that the BBC was going to give this like big coverage. I think someone there probably decided this is what the young people are into. It's zeitgeisty, and now let's give this proper coverage and treat it like a big event, right?
This seems real recent. We better cover it.
Exactly. So they had one of their younger hip reporters there, like ringside, covering it live. And back in the studio was the old guy that normally presents this late night slot, who's a bit more your old school, old-fashioned radio presenter who you don't imagine would be too into Logan Paul or KSI.
Mm-hmm.
He does happen to be quite into boxing, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, they started doing all these live reports and live crosses to this thing, and this young guy was there in the stadium going, and now they're coming out, and now the fight's starting. And hey, this guy was taking it seriously. He was treating it for what it was. You know, he was realizing this was like a YouTube big corporate event sort of thing, but he was giving it fair coverage, right? He was treating it like a big event.
Right.
And it probably was quite a big event, you know, 17,000 people in the stadium and all these people watching. And the BBC guy back in the studio, like the main presenter, sort of bit his tongue for a while. And then eventually he just lost the plot. And he absolutely went on a rant. And he was saying, I cannot believe we're covering this on the BBC. This was his show. He was talking over and bullying the guy back in the stadium, going, this isn't boxing. This is stupid. This shouldn't be on the BBC. And he absolutely just went on this hour-long tirade that was coinciding with the coverage of the event. It was this really bizarre scenario where he was the host of the show, saying that he was absolutely embarrassed by the stupidity of this, and he was trying to rile people up, obviously. That's what radio presenters do.
Was he mad as hell and not going to take it anymore?
Exactly. He was like that. Right? So he opened the phones, because it's like a phone-in show,
right?
And lots of people were phoning in saying, I absolutely agree with you. This is rubbish. This is stupid. I can't believe we're giving these people all this extra exposure. And then some people, usually younger people, were phoning in and saying, this is a big deal to me. I'm really interested in it. You know, this deserves some coverage.
Uh-huh.
And he was acknowledging, hey, I'm an older guy. and this is a young person's thing, but I still think it's ridiculous. And I got so riled up, Gray, by it in so many different ways. I was like, I've had enough.
Like, how are you riled up about this? What are the Brady dimensions of riled upitude?
I can't even begin to tell you. I was having so many different thoughts. And eventually I was like, I can't take it anymore. And I pulled over on the side of the road. I got my phone out. And I phoned into the show.
No.
I phoned in, right? I pulled over in this quiet lane and I phoned in.
Oh, no, Brady, don't phone in.
I
Don't
know.
ever phone
I know.
in. Why?
It's the worst thing to do, right?
You're the man with the hat in the audience right now. Don't phone into a radio show.
The producer answered, right? These producers are like the first line of the defense to figure out whether or not you should be allowed on the show. And I was a gift because I'm like an older guy, you know, but I'm also like a successful YouTuber with millions of subscribers and hundreds of millions of views.
And someone who's worked in the news business.
Yeah.
I would imagine from a producer's perspective, you are a diamond in the rough calling into the show.
I was a gift from God. So I phoned in and said, I want to speak. I want to go on. I want to talk. I'm this successful YouTuber. I don't agree with what he's been saying. I've got things to say. And the producer, who I think was a bit of a flunky, said, let me talk to the control desk, like the producers of the show, for a second. They put me on hold. And then she came back and said, they definitely want you, but they have to go to the news now. You'll have to wait for like 10 minutes. Can you please wait? But you're definitely going to go on. They're going to slot you an exact time and everything.
Okay.
And like I had the dogs in the car and I was nearly home and I'd been driving for a long time. I had this moment of zen. Maybe I looked down at my what would CGP Grey t-shirt do? Like, you know, what would Grey do? And I just said, so I'm going to have to wait 10 minutes? And then I just said, no, I'm going to pass.
Oh, thank God. Oh, thank God, Brady.
So then I got back in the car and I kept driving home. And then I started listening to the show again and I got all riled up again.
Oh, no.
So when I got home, I pulled up at home and I rang the desk again and someone different answered. I said, oh, it's that YouTube guy again. I'm home now. I've got things to say. And they were like, oh, okay. Yeah, okay. God. Can we put you on? Like, hang, and said, I'll talk to the producers again.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
And then they came back and said, yeah, they'd like to speak to you. They can't do it right now because they were talking about something else. Can they call you back in about 15 minutes?
Brady, I can't deal with the emotional roller coaster of this. Okay, oh God, okay.
They said, can I call you back in 15 minutes? I looked down again at my what would CGP Grey do t-shirt and I went, I said, no, forget it. Forget it. I don't want to do it. And then I stopped listening to the radio show and I just went and sat down on the sofa and calmed down. And then the obvious realization came over me that if you're not listening to it, it doesn't exist anymore and you don't care. I'm like, why didn't I just change the station? That was the solution. The solution wasn't to phone in and try and get on air. And this great relief came over me because I know if I got on, I've done a lot of live radio actually on the BBC, but I've done it as like a guest twice. Once I phoned in and it went really well.
Okay.
And another time I went in to like talk as a civilian person about sport and it went really, really badly. And I lost control of the situation and it was a lesson to me. And I realized if I'd gone on, 95% sure I would have lost the situation. The presenter would have taken it somewhere I didn't want it to go. I would have looked stupid. I wouldn't have said what I wanted to say and then he would have hung up on me. So I didn't get on, thank goodness. But God, I was so riled up. I phoned in twice. Can you believe that? What an idiot.
Oh, man.
Can you imagine any circumstance under which you would phone into a radio show?
No, never. Not in a million years. But I can imagine, were I a slightly different person being in that position.
Yeah.
I have so many conflicted feelings about this story of yours. One, I'm very glad that I was able to help you remotely. With hashtag what would CGP Grey do?
Yeah.
I'm glad you were able to think of that in your moment of need. I'm glad to spread the good word. But I can totally understand that feeling of it's not just infuriating. It's a thing that's infuriating that is hitting your not only knowledge, but professional working world.
I felt like I knew so much more than him. Like, you got no idea. Like, it was hitting my professional world in every possible way.
Yeah.
Because it was about YouTube and YouTubers.
Right.
It was about the BBC and news
Right,
coverage
yep,
and journalism.
yeah.
It was also about sport, because
It's about sport,
there was a lot
yep.
of talk about, is this a sport? Is this not a sport? Like, it was hitting every possible interest and passion of mine. And I was like, I couldn't take it. I couldn't handle the wrongness.
I can see the perfect storm there. And why I say if I was slightly different, I could imagine doing it because I agree that I would never call into the radio show because of that thing that you say there, that you are now playing in someone else's arena.
Yeah.
And you are not on your home turf. That is bad news. This is why, like, Brady, when we record the podcast together, we're on our home turf here, right? There's a reason the show doesn't go out live. But someone who's the radio presenter, they don't have your best interest at heart, right? They want something interesting to happen, or like they want to control it. And so that is super bad news. I can say that I wish I could think of a particular example right now, but the closest I have come is that I have at times started to produce a video out of something that just happens to be a perfect storm for me of things that really anger me.
Yeah.
And it's that same thing of like, oh, I'm so mad right now. And then I wake up the next morning and like, I'm still pretty mad, but 99% of the time, although there is one notable exception.
Yeah, I was going to say, did I upload that stick figures video last night? Oh my goodness, I did.
Yeah, it's like
that was your phone in of the radio show, that video.
Yeah, with one notable exception where it was a perfect storm of #regrets. Most of the time, my slow production cycle saves me, and I can do the same thing of you, where it's like, why am I even thinking about doing this?
Because if they'd thrown me on live straight away, it would have happened. If they said, yep, you're on, it would have been a very public dethroning of the Radio Times radio and podcast champion.
Yes, it would have been. Oh, I know. I can think of the most recent one it was one of the recent changes to YouTube subscription model where it came out that like the details don't matter.
Yeah.
It happened to hit me at like just the wrong moment. And so I had written most of this script about how YouTubers should run their online businesses and like don't trust it. Like I'd written this whole thing about like you can't trust YouTube as far as you can throw them. And I was like, I'm going to turn this into a video, like doo-pa-doo-pa-doo, like I'm getting to work. And then the next day it's like, wait a minute. Let's do a return on investment analysis of this idea, right? They're like, this idea is a terrible idea. Thank goodness that there is time to think it over, because sometimes there isn't time to think it over when you make a thing really fast and before Brady gets downstairs, it's already uploaded.
Besides the stick figures one, which obviously went live, have you ever got any further down the path than writing a script? Have you ever started animating one and thought, hang on.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah. Okay. For various reasons, I will not talk about what this was.
Right.
But some people listening will probably know. But there is a video, yes, that I'm now remembering. I was at 1 minute to midnight on the nuclear clock because I had written, animated, uploaded, tagged, and monetized a video that was essentially a video made out of anger and frustration on a particular topic.
Wow.
And all I had to do was press the publish button.
Yeah.
And I remember like staying my hand over the big red button on this one. And then I decided, you know what? Let's not do this. And so I didn't. And to this day, I am very glad that I didn't. I still think all of my grievances were legitimate.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have helped anything had I uploaded that video. So yes, I'm thinking it over. Yeah, there was one time when I had but to press a button, and I think it wouldn't have been better. It would have been worse.
I tell you what, if we get to $100 million on the Patreon, we'll publish it on the Palo Internet YouTube channel.
No.
$100 million?
Ooh, that is a lot of money. I mean, 100 million between us or 100 million for each of us?
Of course I'm going to say each. No. Just all for you, Gray.
I'm not making any promises, but that would be quite compelling.
Have you still got it, like, in a folder somewhere?
Yeah, I still have it. In a
Is it still on your YouTube channel as private, or have you deleted it off?
No. I took it down because having it up on the channel it's a bit like if you're writing an angry email to someone.
Yeah.
You don't want to put the address in the to field. Or there's a thing that I see other people do, which makes me super nervous. When someone is writing, say, an important text message, and they're writing it in the text field to the person, It's that same feeling of like, hey, you're playing with a loaded gun here. Like, especially with the text message, like your fingers are inches away from the button that just sends it.
I know. So easy to send a text by mistake.
The moment I have a text that goes past a sentence or two, and that text is even just like a little bit important that I get the wording right, I always will say write it in notes and then paste it into the text message and then send it. I have been on a campaign with some people I know to be like, hey, maybe you should write these really long, important text messages somewhere else first. But I have been unsuccessful in that campaign. But yeah, so no, I've taken it down from the YouTube channel because it feels a bit too like I don't need to fall on my mouse the wrong way one day and then publish it and also miss out on the Hello Internet Patreon bounty that may come in the future for the reward.
It's also such a lottery, depending on what messaging system you're using on like Facebook or your iOS or Twitter or whatever, as to what pressing return will do. Will it start a new line or will it send the message?
Yes.
I never know which one it will do on what system. And so sometimes I think, if I press return now, will it matter if it sends?
Right. Or the reverse of that. It's like, I'm pretty good about doing alt return. Usually works, but I know there's a couple places where it doesn't. Yeah. Uh-oh.
Anyway, I didn't get on air, so happy ending.
I'm very glad you didn't get on air, Brady. But, you know, do you want to rant your thoughts about the boxing match?
No. And you know what? My thoughts weren't about the boxing match.
Okay.
My thoughts were all about the radio coverage of it and the discussion of it. I couldn't really give two hoots about the boxing match. My overall thoughts about the BBC covering it was, yeah, they were right to cover it. They gave it a bit too much. They gave it too much coverage, but they were right to cover it because it was a big novel event and there was a lot of attention on the country, on Britain for that hour or two. So it was a local story for the country. There wasn't much else happening at the time. Yeah, I thought it was right to cover it. Couldn't care about the match itself, though, myself. You know.
Do you know who won, Brady?
I know it was a draw.
Oh!
Funnily enough.
That's King Kong versus Godzilla there, right? Where, we can't have either
that did
person
undermine
win,
it.
right?
I did feel a bit sorry for the reporter, because the reporter at the event was kind of sticking up for it, sticking up for the event. Like, he was really good. He was really realistic about it, but he was sticking up for the event. He was like the advocate of the event, and he was getting this tirade from the other end. And I thought he was doing a really good job. And then when they announced that result and he had to convey, they've just announced it's a draw, he was so undermined. Because then it was like, the fix is in, you know.
Yeah, it's like, look at all the wires showing through this marionette display.
You didn't watch the big fight then, Gray?
No, I didn't watch the big fight. Only really realized it happened today when, in frantically trying to prepare for the show, I briefly appeared on Twitter. Then all of a sudden I saw people talking about the fight. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I vaguely knew this was a thing. Okay.
Was it $7.50 to watch the fight? If you and I had a boxing match, do you reckon a lot of Tims would watch?
The problem, Brady, is back in the early days of the show, we've already revealed what would happen in a boxing match like that. Although, I'm just wondering now if a Brady even really remembers.
Yeah, but the discussion with the fight was that you would win, but that was if it was like almost like a fight for life. Like, you would just turn into like a mad dog and maybe win.
Yeah.
But if it was a fight just for competition, like for show, and it was like a sporting contest, you think I would win? You
would win because I would concede at the first moment of discomfort. That's what would happen. One punch at the face and be like, I'm done, right? He wins. He's the better boxer than me. I'm good, thanks. Thanks, everyone.
You have the size advantage, though, and that's quite a thing in boxing.
That's why. I'm saying, the first sign of discomfort, I'm out. But if it was a cage match to the death, I would tear you apart without a question, yeah. But that's why we can't have the boxing match, because the outcome is already known.
There is a video that just came out today that is absolutely perfect for what you just said, which was another boxing match that happened last night. This was a real boxing match, and one of the fighters was unhappy with the financial or contractual arrangements about the fight. But for some reason, he didn't express this before the fight, and they did their touch of gloves and got ready to fight. They went to their corners, and the bell went ding, ding, ding. And as soon as the bell rang, this boxer just went through the ropes and left and walked out. And the other boxer was just standing there going, what the hell? And this guy just walked through the crowd and walked out the door out the back. No one knew it was going to happen.
I like that man's strategy. That
would be you. That would be you in the big match.
He's the real winner. Hello, Internet. We have a new sponsor today at the show that I think you should go give a try. It's Molecule. Molecule is a next generation air filter. Now, if you have an air filter in your house, it's almost certainly what's called a HEPA filter. Now, these HEPA filters were invented in World War II, over 1,000 years ago now in technology time. I mean, sure, they'll work. They're better than nothing, but they only work on particles larger than 0.3 microns. That sounds pretty small to me, you may say, but there are lots of allergens, mold, bacteria, viruses, and other airborne chemicals that are smaller than 0.3 microns. Molecule is the air filter that can destroy them. It can destroy things up to 1/1000th the size of what a HEPA filter can do. That level of filtering can have a meaningful impact for asthma and allergy sufferers. Or, frankly, it's something to think about for anyone who lives in a big city, which may not have the highest quality of air to breathe all the time. And breathing clean air can transform the way that you sleep, particularly, again, if you are asthmatic or if you suffer from allergies. Now, Molecule isn't just a great-looking air filter. It's really quite beautiful if you go to the website to check it out. But it was developed with research that was backed by the EPA, and it's been extensively tested by third parties and verified. Now, you should know in advance, this is a serious quality, revolutionary air filter, and thus it is not going to be the kind of price that you're used to with HEPA filters. But this is a case where you get what you pay for. And for Hello Internet listeners, it comes with a pretty hefty discount. So if you go to molecule.com, that's MOLEKULE, molecule with a K, and use the code HELLO, you will get $75 off your first order. That is a pretty big chunk of change. So once again, that's Molecule, MOLEKULE.com, and at checkout, enter offer code HELLO to let them know that you heard about Molecule from Hello Internet, and that's what convinced you to give it a try. If you want to breathe air that has removed even the teeniest and tiniest of bad things from it, go to molecule.com and check them out. Thanks to Molecule for cleaning the air in people's spaces, and thanks to them for supporting the show.
Feedback from our previous episode. As always, my ability to predict what we discussed in the previous episode that would cause discussion was way off.
Right.
Way off. I thought, the people are going to want to talk about this and that, and there's some salient points there that's going to stimulate discussion. All anyone wanted to talk about was whether Gray or Brady is on the left or the right in their heads when they're listening to Hello Internet. I've never seen so much discussion of a topic.
I think it may be one of the most, it's got at least top 3 domination of the Reddit discussion, without a doubt.
Yeah,
what I think is really funny is sometimes, as I've mentioned before, when you're recording the show, you're just talking. You don't know what words come out of your mouth. And sometimes I've recorded the show and there's a moment where it even makes me cringe a little bit. And I made that comment about not wanting to carry around a cloth bag like a peasant. And listening back, I was thinking, ooh, I might get a lot of feedback on not a single comment, right? And it's like nobody cares. Like literally not one.
Now you're giving people a second bite at it by saying it again.
It is endlessly fascinating and interesting and unexpected what gets people's attention, what doesn't. And it's like, oh, we're going to do a big topic here. I'm sure lots of people are going to talk about it. Nope, minor thing in passing we didn't even really discuss before the show. Boom, that's the whole thing. So yes, left versus right. Where do people position you and me in their head in what I always like to imagine the podcast as, what I want the podcast to be, the experience for the listener, is that, it's a conversation between friends, and the listener just happens to be a friend that isn't saying very much in this conversation. That's what I want the experience to be. That's what I hope the experience is for the listeners. I think that the tremendous response of people having a positional awareness of us feels like, some sort of evidence for a little bit of a victory of that feeling, that people had lots of responses, lots of really strange responses as well. Aside from just the left-right thing, there were some people who had like an up-down positioning in their head, or like they were several drawings in the subreddit about here's how it is. There's one guy I really liked who it was basically like A/B cameras in a movie, right? That when one of us speaks, it's like that switches to A camera, and when the other person speaks, that switches to B camera.
Nice.
It's like people's internal landscape is quite various and unexpected.
Yeah, I heard one person said that he or she imagines us inside their brain, but Brady's in the front part of my brain and Gray's in the back part of my brain.
Brains are weird. Brains are super weird. There were several attempts to try to collate a bunch of this data. The one I'll put in the show notes is someone threw up a strawpoll.me link for people to vote on.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that.
And at least on that one, I take it as somewhat representative that the choices were, one of us on the left and one of us on the right, or neither.
Yeah.
And that one broke down to be roughly a third for
Yeah.
each. It was basically even. I did see that just before we recorded, you threw up a Twitter poll as well for left versus right.
Yeah, and same results.
Interesting.
Which makes me think, obviously, there's just no bias. It's but both polls have a very, very slight preference to Gray on the left, but such a small difference that it's not really a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's not statistically significant.
No.
If we now have two polls that basically show equal division between all three, I think that's scientific. A Twitter poll plus a strawpoll.me, I think we could publish those results in a paper. But there is one thing which I didn't really think about until the show went up. But I think that there is a lack of clarity in the question itself when we talk about Gray on the right or on the left, or Brady on the right or on the left. On the right or the left of what? Like, when you hear that question, how are you thinking about it? Like, the left and the right of what?
Well, I'm imagining the listener is imagining themselves as one of the 3 points in a conversational triangle. So as they face us, as they face the opposite side of the triangle, who is on the left, the vertex to their left, and who's on the vertex to their right? That
is really interesting, Brady, because you've managed to combine the two things that I feel like I was confused about when I thought about it more later. Because I was like, left or right of the ears or of the eyes? And these are not necessarily the same thing. So to give away my answer, which I was concealing from the audience before to not modify the results of our highly scientific polling, when I think of the podcast and I'm listening to us with headphones, I always think of my voice as going in the right ear and your voice as going in the left ear.
I think the opposite.
Do you? Okay. Interesting.
I'm on the right-hand side of the conversation. Like, if I was watching us have the conversation, you're on the left of my body and I'm on the right of my body.
That's interesting, because when I think about the eyes, because you sort of positioned it in the show, and I wasn't really thinking about it when you were talking, but you positioned it in the show as seeing people who do the animations of sections of the show. And there I have the exact reverse experience, that it seems to me like if I'm watching us on screen talking, that I expect me to be on the left and you to be on the right.
Yeah, that's my way. That's the Brady interpretation.
Wait. But when I'm thinking about us as a podcast, it's the reverse, right? That I'm thinking I'm going in the right ear and you're going in the left ear.
Yeah, so you flip it. I keep it the same.
I flip it, yeah. This is one of those moments where I'm glad we don't do a video version of the show, because I'm doing all these I'm pointing to my ears and I'm putting my hands in front of me because I'm trying very hard not to say it the wrong way. But yeah, so anyway, it's an interesting thing that I never thought about it, but in my head, I flip it if it's audio versus video, and that it seems like we should switch sides somehow if I'm looking at us talking or if I'm just listening to us talking. But the listening to us talking one is super strong, though. Like, I can't imagine if I'm listening to us talking that you would be in the right ear. No, that makes no sense. I would be in the right ear. I don't understand how it could possibly be the other way.
Just to continue this most self-absorbed conversation in the history of podcasting.
Right.
I didn't particularly care about the answer until I was just reading on the subreddit discussion an hour or so ago. Someone pointed out that in Hollywood movies, it's usually considered best practice to have the hero on the left and the villain on the right.
Hmm.
And then when I looked through the polls and saw that even though they were very close, you did slightly come out on the left more often than me, I suddenly thought, am I the villain of Hello Internet?
Oh, no, Brady, you shouldn't feel bad. Look, I think if we ran a poll of who is the villain of the podcast and who is the hero of the podcast, there is no universe in which you are not the hero of the podcast.
I don't agree. I don't agree.
Well, we can now have another thing for the Tims to vote on. Who is the hero and who is the villain?
Oh, thanks.
of Hello
That's going to be
Internet.
fantastic. All right, I look forward to that one.
I'm just so confident, and it's obviously correct that Brady is the hero of Hello Internet and Gray is the villain. Like, I feel like that's not even debatable.
No, of course you're the hero because you're like the underdog. You've got like an arc.
What is my arc, Brady?
You're the guy who learns to become human. Whereas I was human all along, so I'm just
Right.
like nothing. You have a hero's journey.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
You haven't
I don't-
completed it yet, but
and I also wildly disagree. And my handshake collection data in real life shows that journey is not going in the direction that you think it is. It's obviously getting worse and worse. So I disagree with you here. But
Okay.
I didn't see that thing about which side is the hero and which side is the villain. I can see why that would suddenly make the difference matter to a Brady.
when you look at photos of Batman and Robin, who stands on what side? Maybe that's better because that way we can both be heroes that way. And just one of us is Robin and one of us is Batman. I mean, clearly you're Batman.
I was going to say, is that better? Does anybody want to be Robin? Nobody wants to be Robin.
It looks like Batman is more often... yeah, I think Batman's more often on the left, just doing a Google Images, but I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, I do believe this may be the most self-absorbed section of follow-up we have yet done to date on the podcast.
I mean, you're Batman because you're a bit taller and your face is less known, like more concealed.
And you're Robin because you wear glittery shorts.
Yeah, I showed Gray the glittery shorts in which I was spotted, as previously discussed.
Listeners, your imagination falls far short of the majesty and beauty of Brady's glittery shorts.
Thank you.
I've got some complaints to register with the universe, Brady.
Yeah?
It is the disease or the compulsion on the internet called why-don't-you-just-ism.
Well, thank you, Gray. I think you are about to vindicate something that I've long spoken about. And that is, when you complain about something, you don't want solutions, you just want to complain. And when I took that stance, I have been widely condemned for that and mocked.
And I will condemn you right now for it.
All
Because I do want solutions. But
Right.
listen, internet, what I don't want are your dumb solutions, right? And boy, God damn it, when I posted at your insistence that tweet of the busted Starbucks coffee cups, I swear to God, I must have gotten 40,000 tweets from people saying, why don't you just carry a plastic cup with you everywhere you go? Or even better, why don't you just carry a metal straw with you?
I have to say, the metal straw intrigued me. That was the one why don't you just moment where I went, I quite like the sound of a metal straw. I don't want to carry one with me everywhere because it's like the most impractical shaped, hard thing to have to carry with you. But metal straws sound cool.
Metal straws sound dangerous to me. Like the soft, squishy part of your mouth and the brittleness of human teeth. Like this whole region doesn't seem like an area you really want to introduce a thin, sharp object.
Well, you use a fork.
Very delicately. Yes, very delicately. I don't know. The straw, it just seems like a bad idea that you would have to become much more conscious of. Because I'm thinking like, what if I'm drinking an iced coffee? How many times do I just vaguely bring the drink to my face and the straw hits me in the face and bends? And then I go, oh, I'm totally missed, right? The days of that are over when you can punch a little straw-sized circle hole right through your upper lip with a metal straw.
I imagine the metal being quite thick, though, and having like rounded edges at each end. So I don't imagine you being able to like hole punch a piece of flesh out of your cheek. But I
Hopefully
do see
not.
the potential to hurt your gums or bang a tooth or something, though, if you're like,
Yeah.
Something interesting goes past as you're taking a drink and you bang your mouth or something.
Yeah, you're just not paying attention. It seems like a bad place for it.
I
Especially
want one.
because
I want one. I want a metal straw.
Oh, God damn
I
it.
do like the sound of them.
Okay.
Well, you're the guy who gave me, as a gift, at some point, I can't remember when, those metal ice cubes. And I think they're great, but they're like metal and in your drinks and things like that. Like, they seem like an accident waiting to happen. And dropping big, heavy metal ice cubes into glass drinks as well. Like, but I love them. I just like metal.
The metal ice cubes are amazing,
Okay.
and they are the standard gray gift at this point going forward. Like, you were so pleased with those metal ice cubes that we gave you. We thought, oh, we got to start giving these out like Johnny Appleseed.
Oh, dear.
Because they are fantastic.
You're just covering your butt now because you've given them to so many other people.
Yes, that's true. All across the land, people are thinking, I thought I was special. Well, spoiler alert, nobody's special.
I do like the Johnny Appleseed idea, though.
Okay, I agree with you that of the solutions, right, the metal straw is the one that at least is this is intriguing. I never thought about this before, right? But if you give it 2 seconds worth of thought, or you read the replies from people who actually own metal straws, you immediately come into the practicalities of, how do you clean it? Oh, it comes with a special brush so that you can manually clean the inside of your metal straw.
Okay,
and now this again is, what am I, a peasant? Hand washing all of my laundry here? Like, I'm supposed to carry around a metal straw and its special brush for cleaning? How am I to keep this brush clean?
Yeah.
In what? The backpack now that I have to carry with me everywhere that I go? So it's not that I don't want a solution, but what drives me crazy is I think it's the word just. I think this word is
why don't you just?
No help to the English language, right? And it is such a thing that if you were to think about it for 2 minutes, you can come up with a whole panoply of reasons why one might not want to just do a thing. And the thing about keeping around a cup to bring with me to Starbucks all the time is like, are you for real? Why don't I just, where am I carrying it? I'm walking into work without a backpack. I have nothing. So I'm walking down the street now with this cup chained to my arm, always with me. And then now this is also a thing that I have to clean. Am I bringing it back from my office every day to my house? No way. That's not going to happen.
Why don't you just get two?
Yeah. So I can bring one every time I'm going. I can grab one with me. It's like, listen, people. If Starbucks totally got rid of their paper cups and then only had the plastic cups, I would buy one anew every time and then immediately throw it out when I got to the office because I'm not going to carry it with me. It's like I don't want to carry unnecessary cumbersome items, especially like a cup that was filled with coffee but now isn't, that is also thrown into my this backpack that I'm going to carry just for the cup. I don't know. It's like this word just, it's infuriating, and it is used in these situations where I think a person is introducing what seem to me obvious downsides that for some reason they totally disregard.
Is it possible, Gray, just to deal with the plastic cup and straw issue, not the just-ism issue, is it possible that you are ruling out the fact that to make the world a better place, some small degree of personal sacrifice by humans may be necessary?
I mean, are you asking that as a question in general? Do humans need to make sacrifices to make the world a better place? Yeah, of course, I'd agree with that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Because I think most of the things that humans could do to make the world a better place, you dismiss because it will cause you inconvenience. And maybe you need to wear a bit of inconvenience. Maybe we all need to wear a bit of inconvenience. But you're not willing to. But a lot of other people are. The guy who carries the metal straw around in his backpack and his straw cleaning brush and his special straw cleaning machinery that he seems to have with him at all times. He's willing to make the sacrifice. And if we were all willing to make a little bit of sacrifices and carry our peasant bags and all do a little bit of stuff, maybe we would start solving some of these things that might be problems. But the attitude of, oh no, that would cause me some modicum of inconvenience is one of the problems we're facing as a species.
I mean, now you're rapidly getting into this idea of should, which is another idea that I find nagsome. I'm not interested in what humans should do.
Right.
I'm interested in what actionable steps can we do to encourage or discourage the behavior that we want out of humans. This is all we can do in the world. But people do sure love to talk about what humans should do. As I guess, we all should be nicer to each other. We all should do a lot of things. But always with these conversations, my feeling is, what are you trying to achieve? Is the thing that you're doing to try to achieve that goal actually effective in the way that you think it is? And so much of this stuff strikes me as simply not thought out. And one of the pieces of feedback that I thought was very good in the Reddit, which is a thing I was not talking about very well last time, is many of these things, it's not that, like, say, the metal straws are worse for the environment. It's that you're trading one environmental impact for another environmental impact. And this is the case of water use. The example I always really like is washing your dishes by hand or using the dishwashing machine. A modern dishwashing machine is crazy effective in the small amount of water that it uses to wash your dishes. Our dishwasher, it's something comical. It's like, oh, the dishwasher only needs half a cup of water to wash all of your dishes. But people think, oh, I'll just wash a dish and that's better than running the dishwasher. And it's like, no, there's no version of this where you do a better job than the machine does, no matter how poorly you load it. And so I wonder, and a lot of the environmental trade-offs that people want to do, I'm just not convinced, like, have we done a total cost of ownership here for the trade-offs? And I just never see anything convincing. And it always seems suspicious to me that we just pick, like, the immediately visible items always, and we never seem to be super interested in the much harder structural problems. Like I've mentioned before, my particular pet issue on this one is like drought in California, where no one's talking to almond farmers, but everybody's talking to people taking showers, as a great example. But yes, is there some level of discomfort that humans, quote, should endure to make things better? Yes, obviously. But I don't think a lot of the things that people want to guilt or nag you into doing are actually effective. I'm just not convinced by it.
I mean, this is what you do. If there's anything that is asked of you that inconveniences you, you kind of wave your arms about in a way that I don't fully understand and say, oh, I've seen no evidence or this won't work, so I'm not doing it. And I don't know if what you're saying is true or not. I mean, you can just sit there and say, oh, it wouldn't make a difference anyway. And then I'm kind of like, oh, Gray says it wouldn't make a difference, so obviously it wouldn't. So I'm not going to recycle either. I'm going to take 8 towels at the gym as well because Gray says it doesn't make a difference. Like, I don't know. Maybe you're right, but I don't know. What's something in your life that you do that is a hardship, but you do because you think it's the right thing to do? I don't know. Are there examples of things you do because you think, oh, yeah, this is the responsible thing to do as a person? It's inconvenient, but, you know, I'll do it.
That's a hard thing to just pull out off the top of my head.
Do you separate your recycling, do you? Like, do you recycle?
Yeah, we have 2 bins in the house, one for recycling and one for not recycling.
Yeah.
And I try to remember which one goes in what.
Yeah.
But this is a great example of like a structural change. So I have to anonymize the story slightly.
Okay.
But someone else who lives in the house with me used to think that I didn't do a very good job at recycling.
Yeah. Someone that lives in my house doesn't think I do a very good job recycling either.
Yeah. You know, it could be anyone. So what she did, which was completely genius, was got a recycling bin where the recycling bin is it's open at the top. And so our garbage can or our garbage bin has one of those little flippy lids at the top, right?
Okay.
And of course, garbage, you're putting in stinky stuff like, old broccoli, like you put it in the garbage.
Yeah.
You don't want to put it in the thing with the open top because it smells bad.
Yeah.
And then also that means the recycling thing is ever so slightly easier to put stuff into. And we can say that this had a dramatic impact on how much recycling occurred in the Gray household.
That's genius.
In a way that no amount of would ever have affected. And indeed, for years, ever did affect it. That's, to me, the thing that you want to do. You want to make it easier to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong thing. I don't like the idea of like, oh, you've got to perform these Sisyphusian tasks uphill just because it's good.
I had this exact same discussion with the anonymous other person in my house because we actually listened to that section of the last podcast about recycling and straws and plastic. And the anonymous person in my house became quite riled by you.
Okay.
And by default became quite riled by me for not standing up to you.
I'm sorry, Brady.
And I said that this issue, it was around the plastic bags. You know, do you take your own plastic bags to the shop or pay 5 pence and get one at the shop? And I said, kind of similar to what you just said, but in a different way, I said there are 2 possible solutions to any problem. One is you're just going to charge people more and more money for plastic bags until it just becomes so draconian that they will start, you know, it's £50 for a plastic bag. Oh, okay, well, I'm just going to bring one from home for that. Or you do what they do when, like, they design footpaths at universities and stuff, and they don't actually pave the footpaths until they look where everyone walks. And then they look where the students walk and say, okay, well, that's where we're going to build the footpath. And they design the infrastructure to suit people's behavior. So they need to find a way to reduce our use of plastic in a way that suits our existing behaviors, not try to modify our behaviors. And that's kind of what's been done here, isn't it? It's kind of what was done in your house.
Yeah, and I agree, but I'm also like, one of the things that makes me a bit suspicious of some of these changes is, let's just say that the government does some study and we determine that yes, the UK is a tremendous source of plastic in the world, and it's a real problem and we want to try to solve it. Yeah. I'd be totally in favor of draconian taxes on plastic bags. That's one of the best uses of taxes, is to try to capture those sorts of externalities. And I'm 100% in favor of trying to financially punish externalities. And like a ton of environmental regulation is exactly that kind of thing. Yeah. That you're going to charge companies money if they're not complying with whatever the standards are. And like, that's how you do it.
And the cost of petrol in the UK, which is crazy, crazy high because they're trying to discourage petrol use, aren't they?
I always forget that it's so high because it's priced out in liters. And so it doesn't look that different to my eye of what the prices should be versus America. And then I remember like, oh, wait, but it's for a fifth as much gas, this exact same price. It's crazy what the prices are.
Yeah.
I'm just always in favor of structural change. And I'm suspicious of people focusing on the obvious visual things. Or when people propose solutions that just have no chance of ever happening. There seems to be a very big contingent of people who want to just end air travel. It's like, yeah, I'm sure that the air travel industry is a huge negative impact on the environment. But what is the universe in which you're going to convince everyone to stop flying? And there's no possibility to put on a draconian tax to something like that because it's just so vital for the modern world. Like, it would have such knock-on effects to all kinds of things. And so when I see people complaining about people flying, it's always like, I don't understand what you think could possibly happen in a realistic universe to change this, other than just a genie grants your wish and all airports are banned. Things have trade-offs, and there are also things in the world which may be bad for the environment, but they're a net positive for civilization overall. And you're never going to stop people from doing those things. Plus, I do also always feel in these environmental conversations like I have a real trump card, which is I don't have children. There's nothing better that I could do for the environment than not have a child. No amount of drinking out of plastic straws is ever going to be like outweigh the scale of thousands of years of gray descendants.
You are a true humanitarian and environmental crusader.
I think so too, Brady.
You know, a bit earlier today, I was just scrolling through my Instagram, looking at pictures from family and friends. And you know what? Some of them are really good. Yes, there are a few duds, a few more pictures of plated meals and generic sunsets than I'd ideally like to see, but there are also some absolute crackers. But the sad thing is most of them will be looked at for a second or two on my puny little phone, then scroll down off the screen and vanish forever, never to be seen again. And that seems a shame. Some of those snaps are real works of art. They should be adorning an office or a bedroom, classroom, hanging above a fireplace, or maybe even that blank wall in the toilet that you really should put a picture on. You know what's coming, people. One of today's sponsors is Fracture. Now, this is an awesome website where all you've got to do is upload a photo, and then in a few simple clicks, the people at the Florida Fractory get to work printing your photo directly onto a sheet of glass. Of course, you choose the size of that piece of glass depending on where you want it to go. That's all part of the process. The glass is then given this sort of nice backing. It arrives in a beautifully packed box and it's ready to hang on the wall. Straight out of the box, hang on the wall. No frames, no faffing about. It's all ready to go, even with a hanger already in the box as well. So simple. You should do this, people. Do it for yourself or buy one as a gift. That great holiday or party you shared with your mates, immortalize it with a Fracture and at the same time give a really thoughtful present. They actually look good if you buy a few of them and hang them together on the wall because they all kind of match. They're the same size. Can look really classy. They're sleek. They're clean. They look really good. I've given several of these as gifts already and they always go down a treat. Now, for a discount on your first Fracture order, go to the site fractureme.com/HI. And you want to be choosing Hello Internet when you do their really quick one-question survey. That helps support the show and we appreciate that. That address again, fractureme.com/HI. It's easy, it looks great, and it gets some of those best photos out of the virtual world and into the real world where you can enjoy them every day. Just before we started recording, I was watching a Formula One Grand Prix, which is one of my favourite things to do. I'm very into Formula One racing. And it does occur to me, and this is not like an attempt to like convert you or anything, right? It's definitely not. But it did occur to me that if there was any sport that you should be really into or would get really into, it would be Formula One car racing. Like, it's impossible now because I think with sport, you have to like imprint early and that ship has sailed for you. So I'm not saying you should get into it or start watching it. In fact, you shouldn't.
Oh, okay.
But there is so much about Formula One that makes me think, this is like Gray's dream sport if he was going to get into sport. I wish I'd written more down, but I just quickly wrote some things on a post-it note about things that you should like about Formula One. And by the way, this is only really Formula One racing. It doesn't apply to other forms of motorsport, even like, NASCAR or IndyCar racing or anything like that. This is really... I'm really applying this only to Formula One.
Okay, is Formula One, is that the one in Monte Carlo where they go?
Yes, they do race in Monaco once a year. They race all over the world. Yeah, they race all over the world. And then once a year they have a race in Monaco. There's a different race in each country pretty much each week. Like it travels all around the world.
Oh, I didn't realize. Okay.
Yeah. So today they were racing in Belgium and then they'll race in America and they'll race in Asia and they have a race in every different country. That's one of the reasons I think you'd really like it on my list I've created here.
I mean, yeah, that is true. When you add the countries in, it's automatically more fun for arbitrary reasons.
I'll make that my number one reason then. The internationalness of it, I think, would appeal to you. It's very international. And also, all the countries like bid to have a race and they actually pay Formula One to be allowed to have a race in their country. And there's all sorts of skullduggery and multi-million-dollar contracts and all sorts of nastiness and controversy over who gets to host the races and where they get to go and who has to pay and who doesn't have to pay. And like, for example, Monaco is such an iconic race that they can have the race for as long as they want. But other countries would have to like stab other countries in the back to try and get a race. So there's all this like international intrigue about it as this sort of traveling circus travels around the world every year. So that's one of the things I put.
Monaco's so iconic that I didn't even know it happened anywhere else. I thought that was the race.
There's a whole bunch all year. It's a whole championship and they go from each week, different country, different place. Some of the circuits are very old and famous and they've been using for years and years. Other ones are quite new and modern and stuff. It's such a logistical sport at every level, from during the race itself to like the way the whole production travels around. I think the logistics of Formula One is something that would intrigue you, the way that these entire like almost factories move around from country to country, week to week, and all these planes and trucks and things. It's just really amazing. And they always do stories and reports on it. It's really interesting. And the logistics of an actual Formula One factory where the teams are based they're amazing places. I think I mentioned to you once, I went to the McLaren factory, which is one of the teams in Formula One. And it was one of the buildings and places I've been to that I most thought, oh my God, this is the place on earth that would make Gray really happy. They're amazing places. Obviously, it's a sport where there's this amazing interface between like absolute bleeding edge technology and humans. Like what can humans do versus what can machines do? It's a really interesting interface between humans and machines. It is an absolute war of physics. Like Formula One is all about physics in the development of the cars, in the way the races work. Like you listen to a Formula One commentary, and I reckon, without even realizing it, 90 to 95% of the time, all they're doing is talking about physics, about like tire degradation and heat and warmth and the way air's moving over cars, and he can't get past him because of the air coming off his car, and his car's been designed that way to do this. All they're doing is talking about physics the whole time. It's also really like, it's really techie and geeky and statty, but also when I was young and was really into it, it involves lots of maps, like the maps of Formula One tracks with things I used to memorize. I used to be able to name any, you could show me a Formula One track, like a map, and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's the Belgium Grand Prix, and that's that. So it's very mappy. Like money's a really big deal, and finance and economics, because everything's dominated by money in Formula One in every way. And it's this kind of constant arms war where they're trying to control it, but they also realize that the more money's in it, the better. So there's always talking about money and economics and contracts and things like that. There are so many rules and technicalities and things like that that I think would intrigue you. It's very, very complicated. The rules of Formula One racing is like, it's like an encyclopedia of rules that no one understands and are always coming about. I think that would appeal to you. And there's always lots of epic drama, like that kind of YouTube-y drama, because there's such big egos, because it's such a pinnacle sport, and there are so few of these drivers and so few bosses of these teams. There's so much like sort of self-perpetuating drama in a way that I think you would enjoy in like a popcorny type way. And this is just like the start of my list of things.
This is a long post-it note that you have there.
I know. This is just on one post-it note, and this is without me even thinking about it. You will not get into it, obviously, but I think Formula One would be your sport. Like, the only thing I don't think you'd like about it is what most people don't like about it, and it's a couple of hours of cars going around on a track.
Right.
But the strategy and all the stuff behind that underpins it, it's like a perfect storm of stuff that you would like.
Well, I did recently drive a go-kart around a track, which I imagine is quite comparable, and that was super fun.
Well, you like driving too. You like your truck driving game and stuff like that. Like you do seem to like driving.
I do like driving. Yes, that is true. Listening to you talk, I guess I am realizing that maybe Formula One is the logical conclusion of my feeling that arbitrary restrictions in the Olympics are dumb. And so if you were to remove all of the restrictions from the 500-meter dash for humans, you would just end up with Formula One racing, I guess. Like, we got to get from here to there as fast as possible, and it's got to be a human. No restrictions. Okay, I guess it's going to be a Formula One car. That's what's going to happen.
All right.
You said a thing at the beginning, which never really occurred to me. Do you really think it is true that sports are a thing that need to be imprinted upon someone when they're young? Do you think that sports are not able to be an acquired taste as an adult if you were not imprinted when you're young?
I think that's like a massive generalization, and there are going to be thousands and thousands of exceptions to the rule. But in general, I think it's true. I mean, yeah, people can change. I guess if you marry someone who's into a sport, you might just get into it through osmosis or something. But generally, I think sport in general, it helps if you're interested. Because I could pick up a new sport and get interested in a new sport now, but that's because I've been printed just with sport in general. Right. But then individual sports themselves as well, I think, I don't know. Without thinking much about it, I do think it's reasonably important. I think yes, but I could be wrong.
Obviously, there's going to be exceptions to a rule like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's one of those things where as soon as you said it, I think it just had never really occurred to me, but it seems super obvious in retrospect. And I wonder if you could do...
Most of the people I know who are really into sport were into sport when they were younger. Most of the people I know who do not like sport didn't like sport when they were younger. Whether or not that's just because that's the way they are and they've always been that way, or when you're young is the time to imprint I don't know.
The reason I laugh there is because this is, again, one of these moments I come up against in the podcast where I'm about to say a thing where I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say the thing. But while it's just you and me, Brady, and we'll see if it makes it through later. The comparison I was thinking of is you could do a sociological study about sports, like the heritability of sports in children. And this is a term I think people sometimes get a little bit confused about in sociology, but when you talk about heritability, it just means if you know this thing about the parents, is it true about the children as well? It doesn't necessarily mean genetically inheritable. I would be super curious to see something on the heritability numbers for sports in kids. And the comparison, like the only thing that really is leaping to my head as an obvious comparison would be something like compare the heritability numbers to something like religion, where obviously a religion is highly heritable, as in, you know the religion of the parents, and you don't very often get a child who is surprised a different religion. They're almost always the same. So I just wonder if you could do something like that with sports, about the different branches of sports, some heretical, maybe some not, and like what is the heritability factor with children, and then obviously like the heritability of lack of interest in sports. Because my parents were never into sports in any way, shape, or form, and then obviously that got passed on to me. It's a really interesting thought. I'd love to know if there's any actual data out there on sports heritability.
You got me thinking about my parents. I would say my parents, definitely not my mum, and not even my dad that much was that into sport. Yet I got really, really into sport. I think a lot of that was to do with my neighbours and my best friends who were a real sport family. But the funny thing is, that got me thinking now, like in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, and my parents are a bit older now and retired and that, they have started getting a bit more into sport. And whenever they ring me, they're like, oh, I've been watching the cricket, or I've been watching the football. It's been so interesting. But in a way that makes me kind of cringe and think, no, you're like Johnny come lately. You haven't given a whole life to this. And I almost resent them being into it a bit. Like, oh, the cricket was so exciting yesterday, wasn't it? And they'll say something that makes me realize I don't realize that same thing happened 19 years ago in a similar match. And I'm like, no, you're not allowed to be into sport now. You haven't done the time.
That feeling is such a funny human feeling that is replicated across so many different areas.
Definitely.
I knew the band before they were popular.
I watched the original Star Wars movies.
Yeah, it's replicated across everything. And why is it that there's something in humans which almost pushes back against more people liking the thing that you like?
Are you guilty of that, or are you above that? Or do you even feel that emotion sometimes?
I'm having a hard time thinking of a specific example off the top of my head, but I know I've felt that. I can't think of a good example right now.
Do you ever feel that about Apple products? When someone says, look at my new iPhone, isn't it fantastic? It does all these things. And you're like, you don't know the half of what that machine can do.
Well, I mean, that's a different thing.
Okay.
I'm never not surprised at the lack of technical knowledge of younger generations, for whom I was propagandized my whole life were going to be amazing at technology. Turns out, not true. It's just striking me as such a funny thing, especially when applied to your own parents.
I'm so guilty of it, Gray. Whenever like a new film comes out about Apollo and the moon, I'm like, oh, no, there's going to be a whole bunch of people now. There's a new Neil Armstrong movie coming out. Oh my goodness, I'm loathing that.
Right.
We're going to have a whole world full of Neil Armstrong experts. Oh.
I never thought of you as a space hipster, or I should say an Apollo hipster is really what it would be. Like,
totally.
I've been into Apollo before anybody thought it was
exactly.
Cool. Humans are just the worst.
I know, we are. It's terrible.
This thing I love, I don't want other people to love it.
I'm trying to think of something I love that I'm happy when other people find out about it.
Surely, Brady, you love it when more people love Hello Internet. That must be a thing. Like when people spread the word far and wide, that's a thing that makes you happy.
Yes, that doesn't count though.
Even though you were into Hello Internet before it was even published.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's something like some TV show or band I like, and if more people start liking it, surely that's good for me because more money comes into it. They can make more of that thing. Like, surely that's the only time it would benefit me.
The human resentment against newcomers runs deep. Get off my lawn.
I mean, I'm quite happy sometimes for people to get attention I think they deserve. Like, for example, when we talked about public service broadcasting, the band, and since we spoke about them,
Right.
not because we spoke about them, but since we spoke about them,
Are you
they've
sure, Brady?
become, a lot more popular. And that has made me happy
Mhm.
because I sort of think, oh, that's good. Those people deserve success and attention. And I don't resent that in any way. I think the more the better. So I don't know. It doesn't apply to everything.
But it applies to most things.
Anyway, Formula One. Formula One. I think you'd like it. It's got lots of greyness in it.
I'll be sure to check it out.
I'll see if I can get you into that McLaren factory. Because remember we went to what was that place in Waterloo we went to? And you were absolutely smitten with the building and the space because you just thought it was just a great space.
Yeah, that was awesome. And if you could get me into the McLaren factory, I would do that for sure.
The McLaren factory was even better than that physics building in Waterloo for just a cool space. I think you'd like it. Yeah.
Use your contacts, Brady. Get me in.
Maybe that will be also your gateway drug to getting into Formula One.
If I do get into Formula One, then obviously you will like Formula One less well then.
I would totally resent it then. And then you'll start a Formula One YouTube channel and podcast, and I'll be absolutely livid. And then you'll start traveling the world and going to all the races and meeting all the drivers. I'll be like, damn it, he didn't even like Formula One before.
That would make it all worthwhile. I have to say, since this show aired, I've been looking forward to my future as a Formula One race car fan. Race car fan? Racing fan? I don't know. I'll figure it out later. Brady made it sound so romantic. Traveling the world, going to all of those races, a lot of Zoom. It seems like it could be exciting. Maybe it is something that I could get into. But there's definitely something that I know about myself, that when I get into things, it's hard not to turn them into a business. I'm not a man who's good at hobbies. So I'm already beginning to think about what I'm going to need to add to my collection of domain names at Hover. Eventually there'll be a blog or some videos or something, and I'm going to want to have a website as a place to build my future career in the Formula One commentary world. And the number one place I go to for domains is our good friends at Hover. Why have I used Hover for so many years? Because their website is just simple and beautiful. A long time ago, when you wanted to buy a domain name on the internet, you had to go through some pretty ugly and sketchy websites that tried to sell you a bazillion services you didn't need. Not Hover. You should go to hover.com right now /HI to get 10% off your first purchase and take a look at their beautiful website. I always feel like, I'm relaxed to simply see the beautiful and simple design of Hover. Whenever I have to renew domain names or change any information about them or add or subtract emails, any of that kind of stuff, it's just a nice, clean interface. So I'm going to be brainstorming some of those ideas for domain names I want to snap up before other people do. And you certainly too have some project that's being mulled over in the back of your brain. When you think of a good domain name, you need to go to Hover to get it, to make sure that nobody else beats you to it. If someone else is using a competitor, a slower competitor, Hover's simplicity and speed will make sure that you get that domain name first. They have world-class customer support, and they make integrating with any other services you want to use Hover with just a snap. So once again, go to hover.com/HI and get 10% off your first purchase. That's hover.com/HI. This is kind of a big thing, and I'll apologize in advance if it's a bit poorly thought out, but the topic is Gray is concerned about the attention economy / his own attention span. I think if I had to try to put it in under a header, I think I realized that's what a bunch of stuff I've been thinking about for a while and kind of vaguely wanting to talk about on the show, but it's never been like the right moment. For example, one of the more recent little links that I threw in is this news article that in the London Underground, they're installing big screens in the tube stations, where you stand to wait for the tube, so that they can display the news live to you while you're underground while you're waiting for your train.
So where they used to have like ads and posters and stuff, now there's like just rolling news channel or something.
Yeah, there's like a rolling news channel. And the thing here is not what you think it is. I don't care that it's news. I think it's an example of this thing that I am concerned about. And it seems like everywhere, in every aspect of life, things are getting better at demanding your attention. Advertising on the underground isn't new. It's been around, I'm sure, since the, 1890, when they had the first steam trains going underground. Like, I'm sure it didn't take long before somebody put an ad on the walls in those stations.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, the sanctity of this underground space is violated. It's more, this is another example of what was static now becomes motion. And a thing that really bothered me was I recently flew through Newark Airport. Have you been through Newark Airport recently, Brady?
Not recently, not the last year or two.
Okay. I don't know how new they are, but I honestly, I saw this thing in Newark, which to me felt like the horrifying face of the future, which is Newark Airport on every surface, in every restaurant, in every waiting area, has these little iPad screens that are bolted to the desk that are just little rolling advertisements / things that the airport wants you to know. I'm going to send you a couple pictures just so you can see what these things look like, because it was beyond my ability to express the horror in words of what this looks like. So let me just send you a couple of these.
It's like everybody left their iPad behind when they left. Like the rapture happened while everyone was on their iPad.
You know what? That is a great way to describe it.
Because there's no one in that picture. There's just all these sitting iPads like they're in use.
I was trying to take pictures where, I wasn't taking pictures of people, and the horror of it is greater when you see it without context. But yeah, for the listener, I do mean this in a literal way. Like when you think of, you go into an airport and there's places to wait at the gate and there's restaurants that you can sit in, every table and every chair had this little iPad that was bolted in front of where the chair is. And the chairs, most of them are bolted into the ground, so the only position you can possibly sit in is right in front of this little iPad.
Like you could not sit at that table and have like your hamburger and chips without staring at that screen. You have no choice.
Yeah, the only place to put your hamburger would be in the few inches in front of the iPad that they give you as space on the desk, right? That isn't being used by that iPad. And what photos don't convey is they're all constantly moving. They're all displaying ads or trying to convince you to do something. And I look at stuff like this, and while I just, earlier in the show, took a big poo on a lot of environmental stuff, I've come to think of this as a kind of environmental pollution, almost. I don't know if that is me being overly sensitive or overly dramatic on this topic, but in so many areas of life, I see this incursion where stuff is getting better at trying to hold your attention, or even just being distracting in the background. And like, while I was in Newark, it was just intolerable. Like there's nowhere to sit where these things aren't in your peripheral vision, just constantly moving. And you can't either not look at them or be aware that you're like focusing really hard on what's in front of you. Like, I will not look at these things that are moving in my peripheral vision.
That picture that you sent is exacerbated by the fact there are 10 widescreen TVs above them, bolted to the walls above the bar. And I'm looking at it, I think every single one of them seems to be on a different channel.
Yeah. So that picture from the bar, to me, is what the world feels like it's moving towards everywhere with all things. There's not only an iPad in front of every seat, but as you're sitting at the bar, there's TVs across the entire back of the bar, and every TV is tuned to a different channel. Now, this is in the physical space, obviously. But I think you can combine this with a lot of what we talk about on the show with regards to, like, what does social media do to your mind? And like we were recently talking about, I was on Instagram and I was aware, like, oh, wow, Instagram is the first social media that feels like it does to me what it does to other people. It pulls on your attention in perhaps not a good way.
Hmm.
And I'm concerned that the increasing level of all of this stuff, the reason why I think maybe it makes sense to compare it to a kind of pollution, is I'm concerned that, like, it's giving the world a kind of attention deficit disorder. I may be wrong, but I suspect that constantly being in environments that are trying to distract you and getting better at it all the time, and always having with you technology that is trying to get your attention, I feel like I've upgraded my concern about this from, oh, you should do the best that you can to isolate yourself from all these things, into, I think it really may be having an effect on people that over time fractures and shatters their attention and their ability to concentrate into smaller and smaller shards. I think this in no small part because I feel like this has really happened to me over maybe the past 18 months. Like, in this very slow way that I haven't felt very sharply until suddenly in the last month I've been really, really aware of it.
How does it manifest itself? What's an example of you seeing it in yourself?
So I think one of the red flags that has been building up over the last while is repeated efforts to read more books and finding that a surprisingly difficult task. As I have gotten older, the amount of books that I have read has just done nothing but drop. In terms of an actual book with words, not an audiobook, I have read nothing for big stretches.
What are you doing instead? Like, in that time when you used to sit there and read a book, what's stopping you reading a book? Are you checking Twitter? Are you just can't look at the screen for long enough? Or what are you doing instead?
Yeah, okay, so there's two things there. The one that I find more concerning is the phenomenon that the reading is actually harder. I find my
Right.
brain just wandering much more. And now, of course, in some sense, I'm comparing myself to a much younger version of myself. And so maybe, like with many things, this is just a simple fact of getting older, but I don't think that's it. The thing that goes along with that as well is, in addition to finding books just harder to read, I'm finding books much harder to get into. It's one of the reasons why a couple weeks ago, I even did a shout out on Twitter where I was just asking people to recommend, like, interesting nonfiction books to read. Because I had ended up spending basically a whole day just trying to find something to read and totally failing at it. That each book I was picking up, I'm like, I'm just not interested. Even though this thing is interesting, or I should say, the way this topic is described, like, I just can't get into it. And so that I find extremely concerning. And it feels like this thing has happened in this very slow way that, like many disasters, comes on slowly and then quickly.
Do you think that your problem with, like, for using the example of, settling into a book, are you suggesting it's because, like, your standard unit, an SI unit of attention time has become much smaller, or is it because you've become standardized to, a top 10 list with a capital letters headline or a 3 or 4 sentence pithy Reddit comment, and that's just what you want now? Which of those two things is it? Like, is it a style change or an actual, like, quantity change? Is it a qualitative change or a quantitative change?
It feels like both. It feels like the SI unit of attention is smaller. I've been trying to do things like setting timers and saying, like, oh, I'm going to read and don't stop reading until the timer goes off. And don't look at the timer either, right? Just keep reading. And of course, right, failure number one, I look at the timer, right? So it's like, okay, great job there, ability to concentrate. And then problem two is I look at the timer and I'm shocked by how much time is left, right? It's like, oh, I thought I had been reading for 1,000 years and I had actually been reading for 5 minutes, right? That's super alarming to see. The quality thing is interesting because what you were asking before is, what has replaced this? Whenever you're trying to look at any kind of behavior change, I think people too easily focus on the additive part. Like when we were talking about, Fitotron 5000 lifestyle, well, like, what are you going to do? It's like, well, one of the things you have to do is stop doing something else to have time for your health. Because if you imagine that you're just going to be additive into your life, it's totally going to fail.
Yeah.
And so obviously for me, one of the biggest things that has taken up just huge portions of my time is just being on the internet. For me, the two swamps of attention are, without a doubt, it's Reddit and Hacker News, which is like a more focused version of Reddit. But they're the same thing. They're places where people post stories. I don't read the stories. I just read the comment threads about what people are talking about in the stories, right?
Yeah.
And like even that is a way that I feel like I've kind of unintentionally trained my brain to have no patience. So it's like, oh, theoretically, this Hacker News page is full of nothing but links to interesting articles. How many of those articles have I read? 0, right? Because what I just want to get to is what's the top comment that tells me why the article is all wrong, right? And then I want to read that.
Because you like the conflict and the drama, or because you want the intellectual nourishment, or have you just become a bit of you just like enjoy the conflict and the theater of people yelling at things?
See, even there, Brady, you're talking about it so nobly. What I feel like has happened is that these things used to be much more additive in my life. That like, I used to get much more benefit out of this stuff. And over time, it's just become much more of a habit, right? Like it's a well-worn groove in my brain that I go to these places. But by going to them and then just skipping to the comments, it's training my brain to not read anything that's more than a couple of paragraphs. And I mean, even there, we've mentioned on the show several times that like, if you want us to read your comments in the Reddit, don't have it real long. The shorter, the better, right? And I think like even that's an interesting kind of side effect of now I find myself not even reading the article that the discussion is about, but I'm not even really reading all of the comments about the article that I'm not reading. I'm just kind of skimming over them.
You're reading the ones that are short enough to not take too much time.
It's easier to go downhill than to go uphill. It's easier to read the comments about the article than it is to read the article. And it's easier to read the shorter comments than the longer comments. And like with many things in life, what is easy is not necessarily better. I feel like this is a real area where it just feels like I've trained my brain out of having a longer attention span. And for me, the ground zero is really this internet behavior, and particularly with Reddit and Hacker News. I am very aware of like this wider phenomenon in the broader world that, this happens to be the thing for me, but I really wonder and am concerned about brains always bathing in an environment that is full of distraction and is also super full of the easy thing to do at any particular moment. So these are a bunch of concerns that I have.
I can't see how you have allowed this to become a problem, because you're so disciplined about your time. And like, for example, you switch on, like, I know there's no point trying to text you after 10 o'clock because Gray switches on his do not disturb. I cannot reach him after 10 o'clock. I cannot reach him until the next morning. And while I find that incredibly infuriating and frustrating, I accept that's what you've done because you like controlling your life and partitioning things and not having distractions. And so why can't you just put one of these plethora of apps on your phone that won't let you use Reddit except for like 1 hour a day? Or like, of all the people in the world I know who could just say, all right, I'm only going to use Reddit for half an hour a day and the rest of the time I'm going to write a script, or I'm going to walk the dog, or I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to do some animation or something. Why have you not been able to just write a new schedule that doesn't allow you to use Reddit? Why haven't you just banned yourself from Reddit if you see the problem so clearly?
So this is a super interesting thing, and it's one of the reasons why I'm concerned about broader society in a way that's beyond just me, because I've been over the last year kind of talking to a bunch of people about this topic in different ways, and without a doubt, compared to just about everyone I know, my digital and attentional life is already like this monastic existence. For years and years, I've never had Twitter on my phone. I don't have email on my phone. I, much to the annoyance of many people who try to get in touch with me, like dramatically limit all of these ways that I can be reached. So
Yeah.
I find it interesting that even for me who feels like, oh, I try to be super careful about this stuff, that I've still been gotten in a slow way over time that I didn't notice. And so it's like, well, yes, I don't have any of this stuff on my phone, but when I come home at night, I'm spending lots of time just on the computer on Reddit, for example. Like I'm just sitting on the couch and kind of browsing around. And then that's where it feels like it's accreted over time to have this attentional effect. And I don't mean to set up this Kafka trap for other people, but a thing that I notice in some people that I talk to is I sometimes get the impression that people have become almost so used to interruptions and so attentionally short that they seem to lack the ability to notice this. Again, I am aware that that is like a ridiculously unfair kind of comment to make because there's no way to talk your way out of it. But I'm just saying it as an observation that it seems like some people are so distracted that they don't recognize what the problem is, or they don't even recognize that they're distracted.
What's an example of it? Can you give me like a practical example of that? I'm not quite understanding the point.
As a practical example of it, I've had many a conversation where I'm talking to a person about how distracted they feel, in which during the conversation, they answer many a text message and don't seem to be aware that they just halt and stop and then are on the phone texting and then come back to the conversation and seem to be, like, even if I bring it up, seem to be not aware that everything just stopped for 2 minutes. Whereas like their subjective experience is, oh, it only took me 1 second to just reply to this thing. It's like, yeah, but it didn't.
Yeah.
Like I'm not ballsy enough to actually start a timer when that happens. But that's an example of what I mean, where the other person's subjective experience seems to not match up with what they think.
The classic example of this, like before we all became slaves to our phones, would be when you had a friend who had a child and you would go out with them like for a coffee or something and they would come with the child. They, like a parent, because, you know, children are so demanding of your time and, you know, you have to care for them and that, having conversations with your friends who was a parent, they didn't realize like you weren't having a conversation because they would like just in the middle of a sentence say, Charles, stop that, and run off and go and do this.
Yeah.
And it used to be the joke that that's what it was like if your friends had kids. They became these other creatures that you couldn't have a conversation with anymore. But now we're all like that. Like whether we have a child or not, we all go out and just like the number of times I'll go out with a group of like 4 or 5 friends. And it could be like to a restaurant or something like that, or it could be something lovely like going to a cottage by the sea and we're just sitting around in the lounge room like in this lovely place. And I'll look around and all of us, including me, on our phones, all of us. I went for lunch with my friend yesterday who I hadn't seen for a while and we were chatting and that, and I don't think we ever went 5 consecutive minutes without one of us picking up our phone and checking a football score and going, oh, Everton are 1-0 up now.
Right.
Or, oh, look, that's an interesting Instagram post that our friend James just posted. Like, we wouldn't go 5 minutes without it. In between, like a conversation, we were friends catching up. How's your work? What are you up to? What have you been doing? What's happening with your wife? Where have you been on holiday? We were still doing all of that, but never for more than 5 minutes without a quick digi break.
I think that may also be having an effect on attentional fracturing because it also keeps the conversation eternally at a more surface level. It's a thing that I have felt with people where sometimes a conversation is starting to dip down into a more significant level, but then the outside world breaks it in. And you feel like, why are we even bothering with trying to, like, you're just going to have this thing interrupt and it doesn't really matter. But then it turns, our ability to focus in a conversation is limited by the mean time of interruption on the other person's device. And so it's like, well, whatever you're saying should mostly be conveyed in 5 to 7 minute long stretches, maybe not longer. Or just the other thing that I suspect is not good, which I've mentioned before, like why I first took Twitter off my phone is the recognition of having this background demon running in your mind all the time that's meta thinking about the presentation of your own life.
Yeah.
And the one that I still find very strange and I can never get used to it. And I apologize to the people who know me who do this in person, but when you sit down to dinner with people and there is the moment of the food must be presented for the grams first, and a photo must be taken of this thing that we are about to enjoy together. Like, I never don't feel like I'm in an episode of Black Mirror when that happens, where the food has arrived, but we perform this little seance of arranging everything to look great to take the photos, and then the photos go up, and then, well, 5 minutes into the meal, people want to see how it has been received to the internet, like what their dinner is. I find that one like the most strange example of this.
And then your partner will lean over and say, "Oh, what have people been saying about it?"
Right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Jeff liked it. Oh, really?
Like,
I'm totally guilty of this, by the way. I'm
like the Instagramming the food one is the one where I feel like I'm an alien on it. Like I'm a stranger in a strange land with that one.
Yeah.
But then, I'm saying like I go home and it's like, oh, I'll read what's on Reddit and then switch over to Hacker News. And then as soon as I'm done with Hacker News, I'll be like, I wonder what's on Reddit. And then go back. And it's the things you just read, you idiot. And you go, oh, okay, well, I wonder what's on Hacker News then. Also the things that you just read. And like flip back and forth like a total idiot in this thing that I'm not really extracting any value out of. And I think has made my brain worse. And to take it away from the traditional ones, I also want to mention one other area that I'm aware of as having become not a danger area, but a bit like the screens on the underground. And that's to me just listening to podcasts. Like I've become very aware that it's so easy to just start listening to podcasts in any moment where, for whatever reason, like I can't do something with my eyes. Like you're walking the dog, you're hand washing the dishes for the environment or whatever it is. Like you can start listening to podcasts. And then that's a train that for me can just sometimes not ever end. Whereas like, oh, I've started listening to podcasts and they just keep playing and I just keep listening because I like listening to these podcasts, but I can find my own life too full of those things.
What do podcasts take away from you? What's something that you maybe feel you should be doing instead? Because I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I always feel like that's what I do, like as filler, and like it doesn't eat away at other time.
Oh yeah, like 100%. It doesn't feel like it eats away at other time, except, and this is the real key to me, it eats away at your brain's time to just be your brain on its own.
Right.
Yeah. If you're always filling your mind with the thoughts of others, how do you know what you think about anything? This is another place where I feel concerned about this attentionness of the modern world. And like I've had more than one friend admit to me that if they ever, for some reason, find themselves out of the house and they realize, oh, like I forgot my headphones, like they will just have to buy headphones so that they can listen to podcasts while they're walking around, or they'll just hold their phone up to their ear listening to the podcast as though they're on the phone. Yeah. And I have done both of those things as well. And I push back against that. Like I routinely keep uninstalling Overcast from my phone, and then somehow I find it back on the phone within a few months of like, oh, I just wanted to listen to this one thing, and like I can construct some reason why I really need to listen to it right now. And then I install it back on my phone. And then all of a sudden the podcasts are just eating up all of the mental space of my life. I'm just listening to other people talk about things. And yeah, it is filler time. Like it's time that is not being lost to something, as opposed to wasting time on the internet is time that could be spent reading a book, in a way that lots of podcast time, that's not remotely the case. Yeah. But it is eating away at chunks of time where the brain has nothing to do. And this, again, I feel like goes right back into the idea of like attention deficit disorder society. Like if you freak out because your brain has a long stretch of nothing to do always, like that seems like a really bad situation.
So do you think walking the dog with no headphones, no podcast, no phone, just like looking at the trees and walking along is like makes you a better man? Makes you smarter, helps your ideas form, is making you cleverer?
I want to state it in the reverse way,
Right.
that always walking the dog and always listening to podcasts makes you worse. It's not that you are getting smarter by doing nothing in those moments. It's that the constant pull on your attention drags you down. That's what I think it is. Whereas reading books as an attentional exercise, I do think that that is a good thing for your brain. And it's why I feel really frustrated with it. In the same way that, much to my surprise, ever since starting the Fittatron lifestyle, while I have not been perfectly consistent with it, shall we say, over time, having done that, I now have the thing as an adult, that feeling of if I don't exercise for a while or I eat really badly, I feel gross about myself
Yeah.
in a way that I never did before.
I'm finally in that place at the moment. I quite like it.
It's a good thing, right? Like at this very moment,
Yeah.
I feel gross about myself because I've been eating poorly and not exercising. And I don't like feeling gross about myself, but it's better to feel that way.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have done the same thing to my brain. Like I kind of feel gross about how attentionally distracted I have become. And that I am a person who was already concerned about this stuff, but it somehow still got me, makes me very concerned about the world at large.
Oh my God, if Gray can't do it, what hope have the rest of us got?
That's how I feel as well, Brady.
What have you allowed to change or slip? It sounds to me like you're spending more time on your computer than you should.
I don't think anything has dramatically changed. I really mean it in what I said before, that it's a disaster that happened slowly and then quickly. Like this past month, I've been particularly just incapable of paying attention to stuff. Like I can just really feel it, that reading is super hard, and doing just about anything other than just like vegging out, not even fully reading stuff on the internet, has just become very, very hard to do, and has reached for me a level of like, okay, something super duper needs to happen. There needs to be a change on this.
I wonder if you're going, it sounds like you're going down the path of about to do something extreme to deal with it, which I don't always think is the best. It's like when someone wants to get fit. If someone wants to get fit and they say, okay, I'm going to fast for 3 weeks or something. Like I'm not always sure that's the best way to get fit, but it sounds like you're about to do something dramatic.
Right. Well, my plan is I'm going to fast for 4 months. So I don't know if that sounds dramatic to you or not. But I wanted to talk to you about this, Brady, because I feel like if anybody is going to push back on me in an interesting and unexpected way, it's you. But what I am endeavoring to do, I haven't nailed down the details fully yet. I really think that I need to dramatically close myself off to the external world in a bunch of ways. That I allow too much to come in through the internet or through podcasts or through social media. And I feel like my brain needs some time to heal and to be almost without a doubt super bored. But that's the medicine, that's the good medicine here. Like that is the thing that is necessary, is less coming in and more mental space. So I'm kind of thinking of doing this until the end of the year.
What does that look like? Like, how extreme is this? Sounds very hermit-like.
It's not the cabin in the woods yet. I mean, we all know that's like someday that's the eventual end game for Gray. We're not there yet, right? That's, a whiles off. But here's my broad outline. I'm going to stop listening to podcasts in the same way that years ago I just stopped watching educational videos. Like that was a good decision that I have I've stuck with. There's a couple of little asterisks for professional reasons there, but like I just don't really watch YouTube videos in the same way that I used to. And it's like, oh, that was a good decision. This is a kind of incoming thing that I don't really want in my life.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to do that with podcasts. I'm just
Right.
going to stop listening to podcasts. And the thing that may have a bit of an impact on you, Brady, is I'm going to go without going back on places like Hacker News and Reddit.
Yeah.
But I think that even means not reviewing comments on Reddit threads.
Yeah.
I think if there's something that I know in my personality is I'm much better at abstaining from things than being moderate about things.
Right.
I don't work with the like, oh, we'll do things in moderation. Have some popcorn at the movie in moderation. No, that will never work. And I know that about myself. And so I've been thinking it over, and I was originally trying to think like, well, I could not go on Reddit except for professional reasons, but it's like that door feels dangerously open and ready for abuse. I think it would also be just interesting to produce a bunch of podcasts without necessarily directly seeing the feedback from people on those podcasts. And that worm did work its way into my brain a little bit when we had those few episodes that were released in a funny, out of order way. So we never had the comments from the previous show on the next show. It's like, oh, that did kind of work. Although I am slightly terrified of things to talk about on the show. Like I'm always very aware of trolling the internet and like writing down notes and looking for things for the show. But I think that's a door I'm going to close. And I think I'm also going to close the social media door. So again, I'm just talking about this now. I'm throwing this out as the idea, but that's my thought is I'm going to close those 3 doors: the social media, Reddit, and podcasts.
So you're still going to create content.
Yeah.
Right. And you're still going to use the internet as in like other websites.
Yeah.
So Reddit, Hacker News, social media. No social media posts. Like, will you still do like professional social media posts? Like, you know, hey everyone, new video or new t-shirts available? Or are you just going to like delegate that as well and just like not even touch it? Not touch the poison chalice?
Again, I think I have to abstain from things. And my initial thought is not touch the chalice. I think that just works better for me. I think that the comment threads on Reddit are, as I've said many times, a great part of the show. I think they're a great part of the show for the audience as well. But that's super easy for me because when I post things on my blog, the posts to Reddit are always automatic. Like I don't touch them. It's just a if this then that thing that eventually picks it up and just posts it to Reddit. So I never even have to see it. So those like the discussion threads can still exist, and I can do a thing that triggers them without ever having to touch it directly myself.
Well,
what do you think about this, Brady?
I would describe it as like an overreaction.
Right. Okay.
But if it's a big problem for you, maybe that's what it takes, you know? Like, I don't think it sounds like the world's biggest problem. Like, the problems you're explaining certainly resonate with me, and they probably resonate with most people. I think you're describing a real symptom of the modern world. Whether or not sort of 4 months of... I guess it's not that much cold turkey, is it? It's not like you're not going to touch your computer, or... And it's not like you're going to, you know, disappear into the woods and not work. And I think it's all right. I think you could do like, you know, a more of a rationing system. Like I said, like if you had a problem with your weight, I wouldn't say don't eat any food for 4 months. I would say just like have a bit of everything, moderate your diet. Like when you're on a diet, I think it's good to still occasionally have a chocolate. And I think it's the same for you. I think there's nothing wrong with saying I can go on Reddit when I eat my Weetabix in the morning for 20 minutes and then I'm not allowed to use Reddit, you know, and set up, get one of these apps that doesn't let you use Reddit except in that window, and do 1 tweet a day or something, but do it at 5 p.m. each night if you've got something you want to tweet. Also, I sort of project this onto myself and I think, what if I did what Gray's suggesting? And my problem would be that I'm so all or nothing, and once I failed, like once I lapsed once and went onto Reddit, you know, sometime in October, I'd be like, oh, well, I failed now. My streak's over. That's pointless. I may as well just go on Reddit all the time. I feel like I'd be setting myself up to fail. And once I fail, I would fail dramatically.
Yeah, that is definitely a personality type and a difference as well. Whereas I don't feel that way. And I always feel like life is always about getting back on the horse. And yeah, if in October I'm not paying attention and suddenly it's like, oh, I've been on Hacker News for an hour, I wouldn't feel like, oh, well, the hell with this, right? I'm going to throw in the towel. I feel like the experiment or doing this is simply to be aware that, hey, notice the fact that you're doing this. Like, what happened? Why did this occur? Are there adjustments that you can make and try to get back on the plan? Yeah. But also part of the reason why I'm talking about it on the show here at all is to act as a kind of lock-in. Like, I have had it in my project list for months now about doing a kind of like a public lock-in in this way for doing something like this. Like, I think that is helpful for this sort of project, even though I don't normally like to talk about the things that I'm doing until they're done. This is a case where making it public seems helpful to me.
Puts yourself on the hook.
Yeah, it does put yourself on the hook, and would be for me helpful in that moment of like, oh, if it's October and I'm reading Hacker News of like, dude, you said you were going to do this thing, get off here now, and it's not ruined because you made a mistake.
Although you won't get caught reading comments on Reddit and Hacker News. You will get caught if you suddenly start tweeting or something. But
but to me, like, this is a thing that I feel like I want to do some version of this for myself, and it's important to me to have the big stretch to step away. That this feels like it's a thing that I want, that I think I really need to do in some form. And so, like, no one would know if I was reading the comments, but that would defeat the whole purpose, which again is a reason to talk about it out loud and to put myself on the hook for that. And one of the reasons why I even think about like not reading the comments on my own work is this same thing about like creating some mental space for my own brain, and doing that would it would defeat the purpose of it.
Well, part of my reaction is, like I said before, it sounds a little bit extreme.
Right.
And also, like, I don't know if you need to go quite that far, but also that's quite selfish because this is also going to make my life slightly more inconvenient.
Like, I feel super guilty talking about like
it's
I'm very.
That. I mean, it could be quite interesting in other ways for me. But the thing that I'm interested in is to see whether or not it has this grander effect that you're hoping it will have of almost like rewiring your brain. Like, that's quite interesting to me. Like, will you suddenly be able to read books again? And the other thing I'm interested in is because you're not doing this like crazy digital detox where you're not even like touching an electronic device, I'm very curious to find out whether other things will take the place of Reddit and Hacker News, whether you'll find like a replacement drug.
Oh yeah. I was working on a thing this morning where I was trying to write down what are my thoughts about this, to put up on like a little blog post and be like, what are the guidelines here? And immediately identified one area of concern, right? Which is, I thought audiobooks are okay, right? But it's very easy to see that audiobooks slide right into podcasts, right? That it's like, well, oh, this heroin is no good, but this methadone is delicious, right? Right now, it doesn't feel like they can slot in, partly because I've just never been able to listen to audiobooks in the same duration for podcasts. It feels more tiring. But even that feels like it's part of it, though. It's more tiring because an audiobook requires more attention than a podcast, whereas you can drift in and out of a podcast much more easily. Whereas with an audiobook, if you lose the plot, you're like, wait a minute, I have no idea what's going on. But yeah, it's totally possible that there will be replacement activities. I mean, that's what happens very commonly. But I think if replacement stuff comes up, I'm just going to try to be aware of it ahead of time. And if the replacement stuff is better than what has been replaced, like, well, we've still made an improvement. So that's good as well. It's funny, though, because I know from your perspective, you're saying that this seems quite extreme, whereas from my perspective, the place where I am having the moderation is, well, of course, I'm still going to use electronics. Like, I'm still going to use my phone and I'm still going to use my computer. That to me feels like only a madman would draw the line there of saying, oh, I'm just going to abstain from all this digital technology and I'm going to go back to the analog world. That to me feels like where I'm drawing the line of moderation, of like, oh, my phone is an incredibly useful tool to me. And my phone isn't the source of the problem anyway, because it's like I've got that really locked down. Like it's other things that I'm trying to make a change about.
Do you know what? It's not actually as extreme as I kind of thought it was going to be when you started talking.
Oh, yeah?
And I say, like, oh, this is going to affect me, but it's not really going to affect me very much. The only way it's going to affect me is when, like, something, like, goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, say there's some, drama or technical problem or something. Because, sometimes technical problems happen when you release podcasts.
I don't think no, that never happens.
That can happen sometimes. And, like, so when that occasionally hits the fan, I need some like bat phone to be able to somehow let you know that like something needs dealing with, or maybe I'm just going to need more powers and passwords to deal with things as well and stuff like that. But you're sort of saying, "Oh, I'm sorry that this is an imposition on you, Brady," but it's not really.
Yeah. Okay.
And in some ways, it's quite an interesting experiment, and it could make Hello Internet quite interesting as well for a few months, because I don't know what structure our conversations will start taking. I mean, I imagine you'll be bringing quite different material to the table. And I don't know how that might be different. It might be things you've seen out in the real world. It might be things from new online sources. And I might be bringing new things to your attention. So it could be quite an interesting experiment in that respect.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what the result is. And maybe it's not much. Like maybe it's like, oh, right, it's just the world's just boring. And I'm like I'm not getting any better at reading books. And like this is just the way things are. Who knows? I am curious, though, Brady, like, do you agree with my concern that there is something that's ADDing up the world?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Sometimes I feel like I've so changed my mind on so many technological things over time that I wonder, like, wait a minute, like, am I wrong? Or is it the children who are wrong? I just don't know. And it makes me feel better to hear that you two think that like this is a thing in the world that's occurring.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when we record Hello Internet and you go off on one of your long talks, I sometimes pick up my phone and check Twitter while you're talking. How terrible is that? Like my interesting friend, who I do like hearing what he has to say, who will only talk for 2 minutes at a time before he pauses to let me talk.
Right.
And I can't sit through 2 minutes of just listening to someone talk. I have to say, oh, I'll just quickly check my email and see if any more merchandise is sold from the Hello Internet store.
Right.
Or like, I'll check that, or what's happening, what's the score in the Chelsea game? Or I'll watch a TV show, that's really good on Netflix or something, and I'll still, if there's just the slightest lull in the show, just the slightest, I'll quickly glance down at my phone. Or the thing I think is interesting about your problem, as opposed to the problem I see in some other people, though, is your problem's less ego-y than some people. Like for lots of people, it's about themselves. Like you were saying before. Oh, how many people have been liking my gram? How many people have been watching my video? What have people been saying about me on this? You don't seem quite so self-absorbed. You're less of an ego-y person. So that seems to be less of a problem for you. So in that way, it's interesting to me that the thing you're so hooked on is just like other people yelling at each other or making pithy comments, and like it's an interesting thing to me that it's less ego driven with you.
Yeah, it's a concern over the state of my own mind.
Yeah, you've been eating too much junk food.
Yeah, I think that there really is a comparison. Yeah. The other comparison to food here that's interesting is both the thing about like the world is filled with food that is terrible for you. If you look into the industry of food, like it really is quite horrifying how much resources are poured into how can we get people to buy and eat more food. Like this is an actual industry that you as a person just living your life are silently fighting against, and you don't even necessarily realize it. And I think that it's the same thing with much of this attentional world, that you're fighting against these big institutions that are all trying to control your attention in some way, and to focus where you're looking. And it's not good for you in the same way that food that is manufactured to be maximally palatable is not good for you. And the last comparison there as well is, I don't know if I've ever said it on the show because I'm always slightly concerned about even suggesting this, but I have done actual fasts. Like, again, my abstaining personality shining through here. I've done 24, 48, and 72-hour fasts.
What was that like?
Well, the first time you do it, you think you're going to die, and it's
Right.
it's terrible. I am not recommending it. I want to be really clear here. I am recommending to nobody that they fast. But I will say that it changes something about your relationship to food that is hard to quantify. And I know a number of years ago, I did a social media fast. I think it was just for December. And I just was like, I'm not going to post on Twitter. And I think that was about the extent of it. Yeah. And I feel like that had the same kind of effect where, I've never thought about Twitter and social media the same way since having done that. And having done actual food fasts, even if I'm not being great about food, it has fundamentally changed the way that I think about food, knowing that I can go for 72 hours without food and it's fine. Like, you're not going to die. As long as you're drinking fluids, a little bit of broth maybe, you're fine. Like, it's totally okay. And I'm kind of wondering if this much bigger break from things that I think of as external inputs and the normal focuses of attention, if doing a kind of fast from them will also change the way I think about things. But part of the reason why it's on my mind now and why I'm thinking of generally aiming, through until the end of the year is I have a suspicion that this is a much bigger scale of a thing than stuff in the past. So I feel like the phase where we're talking about this right now, I'm still being super speculative about it.
Planning phase. It's the planning phase still.
It is the planning phase. My rough idea right now is to maybe start in September, with the beginning of September. But when this episode goes up, I'm still going to be in the comments and I'm going to be curious to see people's feedback and thoughts about this. So I want to be clear that I'm going to do something, but this is like a tentative first talking out loud with someone about an actual plan of action.
I mean, the most important thing is, have you given it a project name yet?
Project Cyclops.
Cyclops?
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you just make that up, or is that its name?
That's been the name of my project system for at least 6 months.
Wow.
Having some notes on it. So yeah, that's not a joke.
Brilliant.
That's for real.
And now we have a show title.